Mr. Rat, we can't hear the video. Neither can we hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. I apologize for that. I think it defaulted to mute. Let me go ahead here and let me start this over. This is Sherry Turkle. So we'll be talking about her more this semester. In fact, one of the things to point out is that she is not anti-technology. She's very pro technology, but she does have some interesting things to say. And thank you for letting me know. Let me go ahead here and I'll start the video again, and just let me know in the chat box if you can't hear this.
The head of the laboratory for computer science held a meeting. It was a several-day retreat at Endicott House, our conference center, in which he assembled the greatest minds in computer science, really at the time, to figure out the question of what people might want to do with what was then called home computers. The word personal computers really hadn't come into the lexicon yet. Now, these were the first computers that you didn't have to build. These were the first computers that you could actually buy. And these great computer scientists got together. I was invited to the meeting because I had begun my studies of computers and people. They got together and they kind of gave it their best shot. Somebody suggested that children might want to learn to program, listen to respectfully, maybe. Somebody suggested that we would want to put our address books on computers, and people laughed and said, well, actually, paper and pencil little books, paper was perfect for that because most people didn't have a database. They had a couple of names and addresses. So that didn't make a lot of sense. Some people suggested, well, a calendar. And actually people said, well, no, I don't like using the computer for my calendar. I really find little file of facts is much better. You can flip through, it's much more practical. I tell this story because I think it's very important to know, to remember that really not that long ago, we were trying to figure out how we would keep computers busy. And now we know that once we networked with each other, once computers were our portal to being with each other, we really don't have to worry about keeping computers busy. They keep us busy. It's kind of as though we are their killer app. So how does that work? We're on our email, our games, our virtual worlds. We text each other at family dinners, while we jog, while we drive. We take our lives into our hands to do that, even with our kids in the back seat of the car. We text each other at funerals. We go to the park and we push swings with one hand and we scroll through our messages with each other. A lot of my research is observing families, and this is what I see. The children who I interview say that their parents read them Harry Potter, again with that right hand reading them the book and the left hand scrolling through the messages on the BlackBerry. Children describe that moment at school pickup. They'll never tell you that they care, but they describe that moment where they come out of school, looking for that moment of eye contact. And instead of that moment of eye contact with a parent who, after all, has shown up at school pickup, that parent is looking at the iPhone, looking at the smartphone, and is reading mail. So from the moment this generation of children met technology, it was the competition. And now they've grown up. And today's teenagers, this generation of children who've grown up with technology being the competition, they now have their turn to live in a culture of distraction. And what do they tell me? They tell me that they sleep with their cell phones. They begin by saying, well, I use it as an alarm clock. And then they come clean and they say, well, actually, it's not just because I use it as an alarm clock. They want to sleep with it just in case they get a message or they want to communicate. And then they say that even when their phones are put away, let's say relegated to their school locker, they know when they have a message or a call. They feel that kind of, they can tell at long distance that they have a message or a call. They say they can just sense it. Indeed, adults as well as teens report that they feel their phones vibrating, even when they are not. This is a well-known phenomenon. It's called the phantom ring. It's been reported all over. When you take our phones away from us, we become anxious. We become impossible, really. Modern technology has become like a phantom limb. It is so much a part of us. So what is the arc of the story that I want to tell? Only 15 years ago, looking at the early internet, I felt an incredible sense of optimism. I saw a place for identity experimentation. I called it an identity workshop for trying out aspects of self that were hard to experiment with in the physical real. And all of this happens, and all of this is still wondrous. But what I didn't see coming, and I like to tell my students, call me not prescient. What I didn't see coming, and what we have now, is that mobile connectivity, that world of devices, always on and always on us, would mean that we would be able to basically bail out of the physical real at any time, to go to all of the other places and spaces that we have available to us, and that we would want to. One man I interviewed who plays with his kids in the park while he talks to his virtual mistress on iPhone calls it the life mix. So I guess you could say that what I'm talking about are the perils of going from multitasking to multi-lifing, the perils of the life mix. Technology proposes itself as the architect of our intimacies, and these days there is no coyness about its aspiration to substitute life on the screen for the other kind. Technology is seductive when its affordances meet our human vulnerabilities. And it turns out we are very vulnerable indeed. We are lonely, but fearful of intimacy. Connectivity offers, for many of us, the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. We can't get enough of each other if we can have each other at a distance in amounts that we can control. Think of Goldilocks, not too close, not too far, just right. Connection made to measure. That's the new promise. The ability to hide from each other, even as we are continually connected to each other. To put it too simply, we would rather text than talk. Online connections bring so many bounties, but our lives of continual connection also leave us vulnerable. Often we're too busy communicating to think, too busy communicating to create, too busy communicating to really connect with the people we're with in the ways that would really count. In continual contact, we're alone together. To paraphrase Thoreau, where do we live and what do we live for in our new tethered lives? Or in other words, what do we have now that we have what we say we want now that we have what technology makes easy. In corporations, among circles of teenage and adult friends, within academic departments, people readily admit that they would rather text or send an email than talk face to face. Some who say, "I live my life on my BlackBerry," are forthright about avoiding real-time commitment of a phone call. When you text, one young man says, "You have more time to think about what you're writing. On the telephone, too much might show." Here we use technology to dial down human contact, and there's that Goldilocks thing, to titrate its nature and extent. People are comforted by being in touch with a lot of people whom they also keep at bay. And we confront a paradox. We insist that our world is increasingly complex, yet we've created a communications culture that has decreased the time available for us to sit and think uninterrupted. We ramp up the volume and velocity of communication, but we start to expect fast answers, and yet in order to get them, we ask each other simpler questions. We start to dumb down our communication, even on the most important matters. Shakespeare might have said, "We are consumed with that which we are nourished by." This flood of connection affects the development of the self in many ways. Here, I'm just going to mention one of them. Let's call it, "I share, therefore I am." For so many I have studied, things go from, "I have a feeling, I want to make a call," to, "I want to have a feeling, I need to send a text." In other words, the validation of a feeling becomes part of establishing it. More than this, what is not being cultivated is the ability to be alone, to gather oneself. There is a great psychological truth. If we don't teach our children to be alone, they will only know how to be lonely. For adult and child, having gotten into the habit of constant connection, we risk losing our capacity for the kind of solitude that energizes and that restores. So let me share some final thoughts. First, about the metaphor of addiction, which we're too apt to use, and second, about the moment we're at and the promise it offers. First, addiction. People are compelled by that little red light on the BlackBerry that tells them a message is waiting. I ask them why, and they talk about their mobile device as the place for hope in their life, the place where something new will come to them, the place where loneliness can be defeated. They say things like, "The phone is where the sweetness is." We're vulnerable to the constant feelings of connection that technology offers. We should focus on this vulnerability because we can work on getting less vulnerable. However apt, we can ill afford the metaphor of addiction, because if you're addicted, you have only one solution. You have to get rid of that substance. And we know that we are not going to get rid of the internet. We are not going to get rid of social networking. We will not go cold turkey or forbid cell phones to our children. These technology are our current partners in the human adventure. The notion of addiction with its one solution that we know we won't take makes us feel hopeless and passive. We sense something amiss, and we are at a moment of opportunity. Every technology provides an opportunity to ask, does it serve our human purposes? A question that causes us to reconsider what these purposes are. Just because we grew up with the internet, we assume that the internet is all grown up. We tend to see what we have now as the technology in its maturity, that the way we live now with the internet is how we're going to live with it in the future. And that's not true. With the internet, it is very early days. It is time to make the corrections, and one hopeful place is to restart some conversations we allowed to get derailed. To take as only one example, we closed down conversations, and much to our detriment, by getting into performance mode on the network in both our personal and our professional lives. Personally, there's been a tendency to use social networking to perform an ideal self. Many people tell me they don't like to show flaws and vulnerabilities or share bad news online with friends. They say things like, it just doesn't seem like the place to talk about problems. Not even, as one woman put it, the death of my dog. So certainly not about more serious problems. So the more time we spend online, the more we keep a lot of things to ourselves, even as we think we're updating our status and sharing ourselves with the world. But very often we're sharing what makes us look good. We're sharing what's easy to share. Professionally, we also perform in our emails and our memos at work. Business people, lawyers, consultants tell me that in their work environments, they don't want to leave an electronic trace of asking for help or admitting failures and frustrations. So we make it harder to fix problems. We make it harder to be mentored. So we cut off conversations in our friendships, and we cut off conversations in our professional life that would improve our performance on the job. The path ahead is challenging, but clear. For both institutions and individuals, for both love and money, the next task for all of us is to restart those necessary conversations. Instead of casual Fridays, we should all be asking for conversational Thursdays, and it won't be a bad thing at all. Reclaiming conversation, that's the next frontier. Thank you.
Okay, so just a couple things here to point out about Sherry Turkle. I think that the passage in your book, again, we'll go over this more on Wednesday, but I think it's actually from a book called Alone Together. And really, if you read that book, it's kind of a love letter to her own daughter. And she just kind of makes the point. And also, by the way, she also wrote a great book in the 1990s called Life on the Screen, where she kind of predicted the internet, essentially. And but we'll talk more about the readings on Wednesday. I just want to go over, though, the assignments for this week. Remember to just answer these questions. You guys are doing a really fantastic job, so I really appreciate it. In fact, I was even telling like a colleague that how good you guys are doing just in terms of your writing assignments. So just keep up the great work and just answer these questions for this week. How do you fix comma splices? Once again, we'll actually go over the readings a little bit on Wednesday, but just a couple of things that I want to emphasize for this week. So, and also, okay, just remember that for the next essay, that just focus on these things. And I want you to focus on like a book or short story, but actually I'm going to go over this here in a second, but I mean, these are just some of the main things to consider when you're evaluating a book or a movie, whatever it might be. Just talk about the plot, narration and point of view, the setting, the author. I should have put that at the bottom, actually, author analysis. What is the author trying to say? What is his or her background? Talk about the theme or the tone of the work. How do you think it was written? and so forth. And also, you guys did a great job with the first paper, but try to have a good opening hook or an attention grabber. So it could be a question, it could be an anecdote, etc. And introduce a clear thesis or statement right at the beginning of your paper or the last sentence of your paper, or first paragraph in your paper. Also address the counter argument. I mean, this is something that will help you add length to your paper, but it also makes your paper a lot better by saying that, hey, this is what some people think, and this is what I think. And remember that the title of your book is They Say, I Say. So it will read a lot better if you kind of address the counter argument and just to talk about what other people think and what you think as well. Obviously, use well-formed sentences, have a strong conclusion. Obviously, pay attention to spelling, grammar, punctuation. I mean, that goes without saying, of course. But let's talk a little bit about the next paper and some of the things that you can discuss. So let me talk about some of the possible topics that you can bring up. I mean, obviously, like this goes without saying, you know, talk about in the Little Seagull book, rhetorical situations, the purpose, the audience, the genre, the stance, etc. But let's talk about some possible subjects that you can talk about, because one of the most important things that I want to get across is that I really want you guys to be able to write about subjects or papers that you're passionate about. So I don't want to be like one of these English professors that's just saying, hey, you have to write about this subject. I want you to talk about subjects that are really, really important to you. And let me just blow this up into full screen here. And so that's the main thing that I'm really concerned with, is that you are writing about subjects that are really, really important to you. So I don't care if you want to talk about, hey, should college be free? I know that Helena, I'm not sure if she's on here right now, but I know that she was interested in writing about Tillicum. And I can tell you a whole lot, like tons of stories about Tillicum. Also Keiko, another whale that I can tell you so much about him. In fact, his main trainer, her name is Carla Corral. And I briefly had a kind of an interaction with her. Like, so I talked to her, and she has a lot of great things to talk about the subject. Also, one thing before I even get into the next bullet point here, I will tell you that those of you that might be in Winter Park, if you live by Winter Park Village, you'll know that Regal is closing down their studios. Basically, they're going out of business, and it's really kind of disheartening, because I mean, I remember the Mitchell's place, the fish place, that was right next to Winter Park. It also closed. So it was kind of weird, because just like 5 years ago, you would be at Winter Park Village and you would see people going from Mitchell's, the fish place, and eating dinner and then walking over to Regal. And now both of those places are closed. So it's just kind of weird. I mean, I don't know, just in the chat box here, can anybody think of where you guys think that the industry is going to be going in terms of, I mean, just in your daily lives? Do you think that businesses are going out of business at this point? Or, I mean, do you think that we're going to bounce back from COVID, or just out of curiosity, like what do you guys think? Or just hit the chat box if you have any any thoughts on that. It is going to be interesting. Yeah, I think that they'll be able to come back. Hunter, great point. I mean, you take a theater like Regal, it's possible that they're going to bounce back. I mean, this is just kind of an unprecedented time in our history, so it will be kind of a little bit intriguing to see where things go. And yeah, like Hunter says, it just might take time. Okay, so anyways though, so yeah, these are just some possible topics. And really though, I mean, I'm just totally open to anything that you find interesting that you want to write about for this next paper, and also for the final project as well. I mean, obviously you can't plagiarize, so don't just copy and paste a paper that you see from the internet, but yeah, any topic that you think might be interesting. So also look at this bullet point down here, the music industry. Where do you think that it's headed? Because when you think about it, the whole music industry really kind of went upside down after, you know, illegal downloads and things like that. And then you have this whole argument out there where people think that artists, they don't even make like good albums anymore. They're just trying to maybe do some promotion to get out there on tour. And I mean, like, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that that's kind of hurting the music industry? Also, just right off the top of my head here, you could also put in Eddie Van Halen. You know, he just passed away the other day, and I mean, what is his legacy? Obviously, he was a great guitar player and everything, and then, I mean, you could also go into the whole history of Van Halen, and you know, different eras, because there was with Eddie Van Halen and so forth, and then there was also David Lee Roth and so forth. And then Helena says, "Could I combine till?" Yeah, absolutely, Helena. That would be great. If you want to combine topics, and also the last bullet point here too, which is cable and cutting the cord. What do you guys think is the future of the cable industry, or the TV industry just in general? I mean, do you think that more people are going to, you know, cut the cord? And just out of curiosity, just in the chat box, if you want to answer this real quick, how many people actually subscribe to cable at this point? Or just in general, like, what are the options that are out there? Because I got to tell you, I just subscribed to Philo. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but it pretty much gives you all the channels. And I'm just kind of curious to, yeah. So Cindy says that she watches shows online, and that's a great point. I mean, and I just think that probably in the future, I think that more people are going to cut the cord and just start watching TV online, whether it's Philo or whatever I subscribe to, Philo or Philo, or whether it's Hulu, or whether it's YouTube TV, etc. I think that that's probably the way that the TV industry is going. But hey, this last bullet point right here, though, if you want to talk about that for your paper, and just maybe even get some predictions as to where you think that it's going to go in the future. Also, let's go into some possible other topics that you can talk about for the next paper. Okay, do we oversimplify the stars? In other words, if you think of somebody in the media, whether it's Kim Kardashian or whoever it might be, or Demi Lovato, like, do you think that we kind of oversimplify their lives? Are they something deeper? Like, so just the example I was just giving, Kim Kardashian, she's, we can get into Kim Kardashian at another time, but she is also very passionate about protecting prisoners' rights. And she's gotten the president to get some pardons for people that were unjustly prosecuted and unjustly convicted and so forth. But anyways, though, do we sometimes think that we oversimplify our stars and we don't really understand the passion that they have for a lot of different issues? Also, what do you guys think is going to happen with the film industry? I mean, at this point, we are kind of at the point where everything is kind of going online. And what does that say for theaters? I mean, I just mentioned Regal, but what do you think is going to happen for the film industry in the future? And what I mean by that too is I'm not just talking about the theaters, but just in general, like, what are our process? What's the process going to be for watching films? Are we all going to now do it on our TVs, HD and everything? And you can make a very, very good case that's probably going to happen. Also, here's another great topic. Do you think that athletes are paid too much for what they produce? And just what are your thoughts about that? And then same thing with actors. Are actors paid too much? It's kind of funny. I'll talk to you guys more about this in a future class, but I interviewed Tom Cruise. And when you think about Tom Cruise, he is probably way overpaid. I mean, obviously he does great in the Mission Impossible movies. They make a ton of money, but a lot of his films haven't really grossed a lot of money. So it kind of begs the question that are actors paid too much? And I will tell you about Tom Cruise. I will tell you that because I've interviewed a lot of famous actors. Chris Rock was really good, and a few other people. And I can tell you that Tom Cruise was really, really incredibly nice and gracious. I know that he's got he's got a bad reputation with the whole Scientology thing, but I can tell you though that just interviewing him, he was awesome. So I'll tell you more about that in a future class. But hey, like, what do you think about this bullet point? Are actors paid too much? And you could write a whole paper on that. And then also, is there a teacher, because I know that most of you are all freshmen, but from your high school, is there a teacher that you had that didn't get quite the credit that he or she deserved? So you could write a whole paper about that. And then also specific cases in the media, things that are happening right now that you could write a whole paper on. I mean, I know that somebody was bringing up the whole Darlie Routier case, because I know that's in the news lately, and there are a lot of different angles that you could talk about with that case. Or how about this last bullet point? Is there a book or author that you might want to write about for the next paper? I mean, you could talk about Jane Austen or Jonathan Franzen or Ernest Hemingway. And really, one of the things that your book talks about, though, is how your papers can be kind of gateway arguments. So for example, right here, if you wanted to write about Ernest Hemingway, well, you could start off by reviewing the book, and then there might be some other issues that he gets into implicitly, maybe not explicitly, but implicitly, that that you think are important. And the same thing goes with Jane Austen. You know, I guess I'll confess that Jane Austen is one of my favorite authors, but she can write a great book like Pride and Prejudice or Persuasion or things like that, and she's writing a great book. But keep in mind that that book can be kind of a gateway argument to talking about other issues. Like, what is she trying to say about women in marriage at that time in her life? What is she trying to say about children in her time? You know, so these can be gateway arguments. And at this point, we'll kind of wrap up for today. I mean, I do have some vocab words, but we can save that for Wednesday. Real quickly. Well, okay, actually, I guess we'll do this right now. So the vocab words for today's class would be assuage, dilatory, inimical, paradox, and veracity. So the way that you can kind of remember these is that assuage kind of means to make less, so, or to alleviate. So for example, the government has tried to assuage the public's fears. As a modern example, you could say that the government has tried to assuage the public fears of COVID. Just makes alleviate is the best way to remember that. Dilatory means kind of attentive or very, very, well, like I said, attentive or very, very concerned. So for example, and also hesitant. So for example, the government has been very dilatory in condemning the outrage, meaning very hesitant. Okay, inimical just means hostile. So as an example, excessive managerial control is inimical to creative expression. Just means kind of hostile. And then paradox just means kind of a confusion. So for example, it's a curious paradox that professional comedians often have unhappy personal lives. It just means it doesn't make sense. That's what paradox means. Just a little bit confusing and doesn't really make sense. And then finally, veracity just means authenticity or honesty. So if you're saying, for instance, that has anyone checked the veracity of these allegations? It just means authenticity. So has anybody checked the authenticity of these allegations? They don't really make sense. So that's what veracity means. And then we'll kind of save this for now. But at this point, does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? And also, by the way, I need to start doing this. So I should be giving you guys more video analysis. But does anybody have any questions before we wrap up for today? So Jose says, the next essay, you're right, actually, Jose, I haven't got it. It's not posted yet. So I think it's going to be November 2nd when that will be posted. So that's a few weeks away. But I just want to kind of give you guys some perspective to start thinking about the next essay. But for this week, remember to just obviously pay attention to the assignment for this week. But you guys will be fine, I'm sure. But before we wrap up here, are there any more questions? Okay, well, cool. Well, we'll meet again on Wednesday, and we'll go over the readings. But thanks everybody for attending. Also, I'll post this on YouTube later today, and like I said, we'll meet again Wednesday. Also, for this Friday, we'll also pick up on some bonus material and so forth. So, everybody have a great rest of the day. And I'll see everybody on Wednesday.